Companies are outsourcing for, well, one basic reason, and that's to save money. The second reason is to improve services, because if a company, say, is in the insurance business, that means they know how to sell insurance, they know how to service insurance, but as far as the back office goes, that's not really one of their core competencies. The federal government doesn't want as many jobs going off-site. The federal unions, for example, and the state unions are pressing their constituencies not to send jobs off-site. And if I could just read, there are two recent reports that came out. One report was given by the Congressional Research Service. It was called the CRS Report for Congress. It came out just very, very recently. It was called Outsourcing and Insourcing Jobs in the U.S. Economy, an Overview of Evidence Based on Foreign Investment Data. So Congress was looking into why jobs were going overseas. There was another report called the U.S. Government, it was given by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, called Civilian Agencies Development and Implementation of Insourcing Guidelines. So the federal government was trying to do a study on why jobs are going overseas and not staying in the United States. One of the new legal issues, and one of the big legal issues in outsourcing, is protection of intellectual property. Because a customer develops intellectual property which gives that customer a competitive advantage. An outsourcing provider will be servicing, say, multiple banks. Say an outsourcing provider that specializes in banks might have 20 banks that it's servicing. But an individual bank doesn't want its own intellectual property that it's developed to be used by the outsourcing provider to service the other 20 banks. So there's a serious negotiation over who owns that intellectual property. Another new development is pricing models for outsourcing. In the old days, it would just be, for information technology, the number of servers or the number of desktops you would have. Now the pricing model is what's called full-time equivalents, FTEs, how many people are servicing the customer. So it's more of a people pricing model as opposed to an equipment pricing model. Well, there have been quite a number of acquisitions of outsourcing companies by American companies. For example, Hewlett-Packard bought EDS, Dell Computers bought Perot Systems, Xerox now is getting into the outsourcing business. They bought a firm called Affiliated Computer Systems, ACS, which was a $5 billion company. And some time ago, IBM bought PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting Division. So the larger American companies like Hewlett-Packard and Dell are now looking into outsourcing as a way to increase their revenues and increase profitability and making themselves more competitive with other companies. What's happening is that there are a number of Indian companies from India named, for example, Wipro, W-I-P-R-O, Cognizant, Infosys, and Tata Consulting Services, which are becoming extremely competitive. Some of these companies have over 100,000 employees. So a company like Hewlett-Packard or Xerox, to compete with some of these Indian companies, must make a strategic acquisition of some smaller outsourcing companies. So it makes them more competitive, but of course they're looking for economies of scale as well. Some of these larger US companies do have outsourcing businesses, so it's a financial decision as well, because they can drive out cost and make those companies more profitable. These are generally very large transactions and with tremendous risk involved, because once a customer transfers its processing and loses control of its processing to a third-party outsourced provider, the horse is out of the barn, and the customer can't bring that horse back into the barn and has lost control over processing its own data. The only thing to protect that customer in the future is what's in the four corners of the contract between the customer and the outsourcing provider. So although there are tremendous economic benefits in outsourcing, there is a very high risk in outsourcing in the event that it does not work and the customer has to somehow scramble around and find a new provider or somehow fix the problem with the outsourcing. So it's not necessarily a panacea that cures all ills.